So I'm shooting during the day time, or light rather, which is unusual considering the time of year. I'm also shooting in my pyjamas. I'm going to talk about a film I watched last night. And I'd actually never seen this film before. You might be surprised by that given my sort of taste and stuff. You would think that this is something that I would have checked out before now, but I finally got round to it, and I'm going to be talking about BAISE-MOI. Now this is a very interesting film, and I'm going to come to talking about a few of the things. Sort of the genre of this film is a little bit unclear, but we will get onto that. But first of all, I'm going to tell you all the details as always. So the movie was directed by Virginie Despentes and Coralie Trinity. The movie stars Raffaella Anderson and Karen Bach. And the plot's fairly simple. It essentially concerns a part-time porn star named Manu who is, along with a friend of hers, kidnapped by a group of men and raped. At the same time as this is going on, there's a sort of dual narrative about Nadine, who is a prostitute, who sees her best friend die on the way to pick up drugs with a prescription that he'd forged, that she had forged for him. They both commit murder and have to leave town pretty soon. By pure chance, they run into each other in the subway. Manu mentions that she's got a car, and if Nadine can drive it, they can head out on a road trip together and try to get away. Along the way, they find themselves in several violent and sexually explicit scenes, which kind of develop in their perverseness as time goes on. So this film's very interesting, I've got to say. It's a fairly short movie, a super low budget movie. I wasn't really expecting it to be quite so low budget and kind of rough around the edges as it is. It's shot on digital video, and it's got that classic kind of early digital video look with the kind of graininess of the image and all of that sort of thing. I mean, that's the sort of thing that I personally can get on with. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily get on with that, but I mean, this movie, I've got to say, it does look particularly cheap. It's purely natural lighting. In that sense, it's quite a verite piece of work. But overall, I've got to say, the movie does come off looking quite cheap in its way. I also, at times watching the movie, found myself wondering what the whole point of it kind of was. I mean, essentially with this movie, what you get is these scenes of these two women kind of having to fight their way across the country, indulging themselves, sort of taking revenge against a society that they feel wronged by. Then on the other hand, you've got these scenes of, I mean, to be honest, the violence isn't so shocking. Maybe if this is the first violent film you've ever seen, it would be. It's more the sex. And I mean, the unsimulated penetrative sex does add an interesting layer to this movie. A lot of people essentially accuse this movie of being a porn film in disguise, and I can certainly see why that accusation would be levelled, because it is very in your face in that regard. I've got to say though, for my money, in terms of exploitation cinema, this film really isn't anything other than it says it is. It sets out to be a very shocking, in your face, bloody, sexually violent mess of a movie, and it achieves that on every front, you know. And it's certainly interesting as these two characters plod along to watch them develop, you know. I mean, this idea of two criminals on the run who are, you know, trying to kind of indulge themselves. Kind of, it echoes stuff like Natural Born Killers, or, you know, a very fucked up version of Thelma and Louise. I quite like these sort of on-the-run films. I feel like this is you know, it's a pretty cool narrative. I've reviewed a couple. I'll tell you what, I'll leave links in the description to a couple of the ones I've reviewed. Natural Born Killers I've reviewed, and I think, yeah, The Harder They Come would come under that as well, so I'll leave a link to that. I'm going to say though, I don't feel like BAISE-MOI has the kind of strength that either of those films do, particularly The Harder They Come. I mean, that's a much more narratively interesting film than this, or even Natural Born Killers. That said, if you're looking for a film that just totally doesn't apologise for what it is and says, hey, you're going to see some serious fucking and sucking, and there's also going to be some, at times, quite comical violence actually in this movie, I've got to say. There are times when the violence is quite, you know, it's comical, because it's cheaply done. Often it will be, you know, kind of squirts of blood happening, you know, just after a character is shot off screen, you know, and all of that sort of thing, you know, quick cutaways with, you know, people coughing up blood and that sort of thing. And in a way there is kind of a clash of interest, because it does feel a little bit like this movie isn't sure whether it wants to be an incredibly fun kind of look at two criminals who are, you know, taking indulgence and you know, committing an act of revenge in a way, or it wants to be this incredibly disturbing look at kind of sexuality and kind of deviancy in, you know, interest in things like rape, etc. Which I feel like those two things don't come together very well ultimately in this film. That being said though, it is a pretty interesting watch, and I would recommend checking it out if you're into this kind of super low budget, grainy, modern exploitation trash cinema, because that's exactly what it is, and it does revel in that, and I've got to applaud it for that. Overall, I'm going to give BAISE-MOI a 7 out of 10. I do feel like this is a film of some merit, and I do think it's quite an enjoyable movie in its way. That said, it's not without problems. Some of those can be explained away by the fact that this movie was obviously made incredibly cheaply. Other ones I feel like are really more of an issue of, you know, not enough thought going into what the movie wanted to be. But as I say, the movie is totally unapologetic about the content of it, so, you know, if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, then yeah, please do check it out. It's a very interesting watch. Thank you very much for watching this review, ladies and gentlemen. If you've enjoyed it, why not subscribe? That'd be very cool. Also, go and check out my podcast. It's called Ironcast. It's all about music. Links in the description. And if you want to be extra brilliant, why not order me something off of my Amazon wish list? If you do, I will definitely review it and give you a shout out, because that is just a very cool thing to do. See you soon, ladies and gentlemen.